she was as beautiful inside as she was out. She lit up a room, she stopped traffic, and when she entered into a room, everything stopped. She changed the royal family forever. The ghost of Diana will always haunt the House of Windsor.
Princess Diana, like the rest of the world, was caught up in the fairy tale that was her own royal relationship.
The princess made a fatal mistake. She fell in love with her prince. From the very beginning, she totally adored him. She took the jewel and married the Prince of Wales. And at that stage, Diana was in line to be Queen of England. And she should have been.
The controversy over the state of the royal marriage took a new turn today when an article claiming to give Prince Charles's side of the story appeared in the Today newspaper.
I think that the monarchies are fighting a losing battle, and I don't think that he can be king.
I should think they should just part, have a normal divorce, let them get on with their lives, and if it brings down the royalty, bring it down.
The Queen realised that this couldn't go on. She basically ordered them to divorce.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did, but I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become.
No one was talking to her, and it must have been very, very difficult that she had to put on this act as if nothing was happening.
I saw the relationship with Prince Charles develop. She was a shy, naive young girl and didn't know why she was really involved with the royal family. She soon found out.
Eight o'clock, and the route is almost ready. And this is a sort of suggestion of what Prince Charles and Lady Diana will see as they drive in their separate carriages to St. Paul's in 2 hours' time. Police estimate 900,000 already on the route. Although the horse-drawn carriages won't move quite as fast as our police escort encouraged us to, the pace is likely to be fast enough to make it difficult for the couple to see much of individual faces, though each one here is likely to claim they did catch their eye.
It was the most watched event in human history to that point. More people watched that than Man Landing on the Moon, which had been the most popular before that. You saw that creased dress. You saw that romantic lace. You saw that over-the-top romantic wedding. It was the wedding of the century. And she arrived in style. If you look at the footage of Princess Diana walking down the aisle with her father, you will see her looking from side to side. And she once said to me, "You know what I'm doing, don't you? I'm looking for her." And she was there. Even on my wedding day, she was sat there in the congregation.
She spotted Camilla in the congregation, but she said what sort of helped her at that moment was concentrating on her father, because he just had a stroke, and she was really, and he's a very big man, and she was really guiding her father along, and she concentrated on that. So of course she got the names wrong. She was all of a dither.
I, Diana Francis,
take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George,
take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George,
to my wedded husband,
my wedded husband,
to have and to hold.
She was no longer a children's helper. She was the Princess of Wales, married to the heir to the throne.
Neither of us will ever forget the atmosphere. It was electric, I felt. I know my wife did.
Well, I think Princess Diana, like the rest of the world, was caught up in the fairy tale that was her own royal relationship, and she was willing it to work, as was everyone else.
Gibraltar was the starting point for the honeymoon. They made a brief public appearance there before disappearing from sight for 2 weeks. It gave the people of the Rock a chance to express their loyalty and Diana a chance to adjust to being Princess of Wales.
Madam, how are you enjoying married life?
Highly recommend.
How do you like Balmoral as a place?
I think very quickly the reality set in that she didn't have much in common with Prince Charles, and actually they were very different people with very different interests. And that's when the cracks started appearing, and people have suggested, and we now know that that was very soon after they returned from their honeymoon, so very early on in the marriage.
After she became engaged to Prince Charles, he never seemed to be around. He was always so busy. And she was moved into Buckingham Palace, and she had her own apartment there, and he was sort of down the corridor. And she was absolutely on her own.
I'll never forget the day I met Lady Diana Spencer. It was at Balmoral Castle. We were expecting weekend house guests, and this shy young girl arrived at the front door with one suitcase. I showed her to her room, and she said, "You wouldn't stay for a while and have a chat, would you?" I'm completely out of my depth. I've no idea why I'm here, and can you tell me and walk me through the protocol of what's going to happen during my stay? So for over an hour, I talked her through the routine of what to call the Queen, when to curtsy, what to ask for at drinks time, where to sit in the dining room, and the general protocol of a royal household.
She didn't feel she could have her girlfriends there, and I mean, Buckingham Palace is quite a strange place for a teenage girl to be incarcerated, which is really what she was. So that's when her bulimia took hold. In fact, I think she says that the bulimia took hold when Prince Charles put his arm around her for the engagement photographs and said, "Oh, a bit tubby, aren't we?" And she hated the engagement pictures. She thought she looked really, really overweight. She loathed them. She loathed what she was wearing. She loathed everything about it.
Do you find it a very daunting experience that yesterday you were a nanny looking after children, now you're about to marry the Prince of Wales, and one day you would, in all likelihood, be Queen? It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
She was there, quite honestly, to provide Prince Charles with an heir and a spare. And if you watch that early footage of that interview in which someone asks Prince Charles, "Are you in love, sir?" and he says, "Oh, whatever love is," look at the princess's face, because she looks at him in somewhat sort of surprise, meaning, "Don't you know if you're in love with me? I'm in love with you. Aren't you in love with me?"
He didn't mean it as unkindly as it sounded. He was just being a little bit sort of clever with the interview, but it backfired so badly because it looked like that he wasn't in love.
The princess made a fatal mistake. She fell in love with her prince. In the very beginning, she totally adored him.
Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace throughout the evening. Then at 10:25, their patience was rewarded with the formal notice of the birth.
The news that Diana was obviously pregnant with a future king or queen captivated the nation. They'd just come out of this fairy tale wedding, and then this young girl with so much to offer is then the person who's going to provide us with a future monarch. So huge excitement about her pregnancy.
And then Harry came along. So the first 5 years of the princess's marriage, she felt that she could make it work. She always knew that there was someone else in the background, waiting.
Well, Diana was a wonderful mother. She got involved in every aspect of her children's life, and they were her life too. They were her focus, and they were also occasionally her weapon against her husband, which is completely understandable.
The Princess of Wales was in better form. She sprinted past the other mums to finish a close second.
He said, Diana seems to smother her children. But she did so. I smother them with love. I think she was criticised a little bit.
Diana was very demonstrative as a mother. I think she had never been properly mothered herself because her own mother had left home when she was 6 years old. So she didn't really know what being a mother was, and I think she probably was much more like a big sister to her boys than a mother. I think she probably shared too much information with them and was hopeless at discipline, as was Charles.
When I was speaking to Wendy Berry, who was the housekeeper at Highgrove, she said that the boys were very well protected, and they really didn't know what was going on, the fights and things between their parents. They didn't know because there was always someone to whisk them away, you know, a protection officer or a nanny. It's not like being in a little council house, you know, when they can hear the shouting through the walls. They were always whisked away. So I think that William and Harry didn't suffer quite as much as we said that they did because they weren't aware of it. I think in adulthood they're very aware of it, but at the time they were quite protected.
Diana had this idea that she wanted everybody within the household to be part of this family. So, in essence, we were all, you know, part of this wider family. You know, the chefs, the dressers, the chauffeurs, you know, the housekeeper, the gardener, whoever else came in. We were all part of this gathering. I don't think it suited the Prince of Wales that much. I mean, he was very traditionally royal, and you know, it was a sort of very much an upstairs, downstairs arrangement with him. With Diana, it was different. You know, she wanted William and Harry to sort of move around the house and talk to the housekeeper and insistent that they refer to them by their first names.
And then, of course, she took William and Harry to the London Lighthouse to see people suffering and dying with HIV and AIDS. Invaluable. Look at them now, carrying on their mother's work in those fields which she pioneered, in those fields which the rest of the royal family wouldn't dare touch. And I remember the Queen saying, but Diana, you must wear gloves. You might catch whatever these people have. I think it's just born of ignorance, really, because they knew nothing better. They weren't educated. The princess was.
The Princess of Wales felt not the slightest apprehension about her visit to the Middlesex Hospital and its AIDS ward, according to press reports. All the speculation had centred on whether she would wear gloves when shaking hands with the staff and patients on the new ward. But as she entered, to the delight of the staff, she clearly wasn't wearing gloves. And she shook hands with all the nurses, doctors, and all 10 patients on the ward. She stayed more than an hour, but was not filmed with any of the patients. They were worried about public exposure. Only one agreed to be photographed.
Well, I think the princess actually helped get that message across by the mere fact that she wasn't wearing gloves and the mere fact that she shook hands with the patients and myself.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. What's more, you can share their homes, their workplaces, their playgrounds, and their toys. We all need to be alert to the special needs of those for whom AIDS is the last straw in an already heavy burden of discrimination and misfortune.
Being such a compassionate
personality. I think it's really important to remember that Diana really put an emphasis on coming into contact with the public and relating to them and creating a bond, and removing the gloves is symbolic of that, in that she liked to touch people, she liked to be involved with them. And there's a picture of her in 1991 where she's shaking hands with an AIDS patient, which was significant insofar as it helped dispel a lot of the misconceptions around AIDS at the time. And it was something that was a marked departure from what we'd seen previously in the royal family.
And that's what she wanted to do. And the Queen then turned around and said, well, you know, why don't you do something nice? Well, that was a complete blow-up for her, because that made her even more determined to get involved with it. And there's, you know, thereafter, Diana's involvement with the AIDS charitable trusts, of which there are many, was vitally important to where we are today, where there is now, you know, a complete, almost total recovery of people dying from AIDS. You know, that early initiative of Diana, who was, you know, instrumental in fundraising, you know, hundreds of thousands because of who she was, and her visiting AIDS hospices, which I went to with her, you know, to raise the awareness of the problems and the need for research. She had to have a reason to work, and the homeless was another case in point.
For Diana, Princess of Wales, leprosy and the need to rid the world of the stigma that blights its sufferers has become something of a personal crusade. Addressing an international conference in London this morning, she called on people to show greater awareness and perhaps, like her, extend a caring hand.
It's always been my concern to touch people with leprosy, trying to show in a simple action that they are not reviled, nor are we repulsed.
She had to have something to do as a princess. And, you know, for her, yeah, the fun bits of the supermarkets, you know, walking down the streets of Glasgow, whatever, shaking people's hands was great. But getting involved in these major issues of AIDS, the homeless, and so forth was very important to her.
The princess's popularity gave the royal family new blood. It gave new blood in lots of different ways. Of course, with William and Harry arriving, it gave the royal family a new line. And the princess always joked by saying, at least I brought tall people into the royal family. I brought the Spencer gene, so they're no longer porgs. They're no longer people of restricted growth. They now can have height with my sons.
Everyone knows the couple as Charles and Di, in that order. She is the mega media star with a sense of fun, a lover of the good times, but who doesn't hide the occasional impatience or boredom. But the Charles and Di phenomenon depends on him. He holds it together, and does so because he knows it helps the public idea of the Prince of Wales, and therefore the monarchy, whenever he comes to the throne.
In most circumstances, when the man on the street, if you like, meets royalty, it's in a situation that's planned, it's corralled, and you stand there and you'll be there, and somebody will come along and you'll shake your hand, don't say anything, you either bob or you curtsy, and then you move on, and that's your lasting impact of royalty. And that wasn't Diana. You know, Diana would come along, this shaking of the hand and this bobbing nonsense. You know, she would often say, don't call me ma'am, call me Diana, you know, and engage them in a conversation.
I think if Princess Diana and Prince Charles had been ordinary people, they'd have probably got divorced a lot sooner than they eventually did. You had this period of several years where they were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Apparently, post-1986, they were leading rather separate lives, not just staying in different rooms, but on different floors of the palace, going on tours and not really speaking. Royal observers at the time saw them on a tour where they didn't speak, or on a boat, I think, where they didn't speak for 7 hours. So living very separate lives. You've then got Charles going off and not only pursuing his own country interests and indeed his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, as it now turns out, but Diana also seeking solace from some of her own male friendships, and essentially a schism has been created in their marriage where they're living under the same roof but very different lives. Of course, eventually that led to their separation being officially announced, but that was a long time coming and a long time after actually the marriage had disintegrated.
Any comment about the allegations that are in the papers this morning, right at the end?
James Hewitt came along at a time when the princess was first looking for someone to love. He just happened to be there. He just happened to be a dashing cavalry officer. He just happened to push all the right buttons.
Hewitt was very compliant in the sense that, you know, he understood the difficulties of being in a relationship with the Princess of Wales.
In 1991, Charles and Diana's relationship was really bad. They were basically hardly speaking, but they had the children as a sort of mediating force.
Like many British families, the Waleses like to head for the Spanish sun every August. And while they're spared the airport delays and half-built hotels, their holiday nightmare is the world's press. An army of royal watchers are drawn each year to catch Europe's two most glamorous families on the same doorstep. And each year they're given this photo opportunity in the fond hope that after it they'll go away and leave them in peace. Well, that's the idea anyway. The palace staff, one suspects, know better. The visit is purely unofficial. The two families are great friends, and even Prince Charles, who's no fan of beach holidays, is known to thoroughly enjoy the company of his Spanish relations.
In Jaipur, Diana and Charles didn't want to kiss each other. She was presenting him with a prize, and he leant forward to kiss her and she moved her head away, which was the classic picture, because this is a woman who is just longing to humiliate her husband, and she humiliated him in front of the world because the picture went all over the world.
Joining me now in the studio is Andrew Morton, the author of Diana, Her True Story, which brought to the public's attention the state of the royal marriage. Mr. Morton, the palace said today that no third party is involved. Can that be right?
Ostensibly, no, but given the fact that the Princess of Wales believes that Prince Charles's friendship with another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles, has cast a long shadow over that marriage, must be considered when you look at the failure of this 11-year union.
Diana, Her True Story, claimed to tell from the inside the tale of a loveless marriage, with evidence from some of her closest friends, friends like her former flatmate, Caroline Bartholomew.
Well, the Andrew Morton book was a sensation. No one had any idea that Diana was involved with the book at all. And in fact, she even denied that she was at the beginning. But what happened was she made a decision that she wanted the world, if you like, to know the truth of her marriage. So Trooping the Colour on the Saturday, and she appeared standing with all the royal family as if nothing had happened. So she was absolutely having kittens. The next serialisation was about to come out the next day, and then it was the week of Royal Ascot, and she had to be around the royal family. So Prince Philip cut her completely dead. Obviously, the Queen still spoke to her, but it was very, very awkward. I remember that year, I think I was doing a story on the royal news. And so I was standing by the carriages when the royal family get out of their Daimlers and into the carriages. And I mean, you almost could feel the atmosphere. And no one was talking to Diana. No one was talking to her. And it must have been very, very difficult that she had to put on this act as if nothing was happening. In the summer of '92, a recording of Diana speaking to one of her friends, who actually was her lover, James Gilby, appeared in one of the newspapers. The transcript of this recording was unbelievable. It was, and he called her Squidgy, and she told him all her woes about, and what she thought about members of the royal family, and you know, the Queen Mother, how cold the Queen Mother was, and it was an extraordinary, explosive moment. And really, there was very little that the Queen could do after that.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear. At the end of this year, when I've completed my diary of official engagements, I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far. I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
Much later on, Prince Charles did an official biography with Jonathan Dimbleby. And Dimbleby asked Prince Charles, really, when his affair with Camilla started, and he said when his marriage had irrevocably broken down. And that was after Prince Harry was born. Everyone was writing frantically, and it was an enormous story. He'd admitted adultery, basically, on television. The night that the interview came out, Diana was at the Serpentine Gallery.
The press thought that she was going to wear a completely different dress. So you can imagine their surprise when she steps out of the car and she is wearing this gorgeous little black dress.
She just looked amazing, and she called it her revenge dress.
She had to look the best, she had to perform the best. So I said, you go out there, you stride, you hold your head high, you put your hand out firmly and say to yourself, I'm Diana. I'm the mother of the future King of England, and I'm here to stay. And that's exactly what she did.
And I think she was delighted, actually, when that interview came out. I think she suddenly thought, oh, right, here you go now. It's your turn. And it made her look, you know, she looked so much better. It made her look the wronged wife, which, of course, she was.
Many believe that this latest book of Revelations is by far the most damaging, as it further destroys the already badly tarnished mystique of royalty. It also makes virtually impossible the notion of Prince Charles and Diana jointly ascending the throne together. It also calls into question Prince Charles's judgment and his suitability as king. Now it's reported that some members of the cabinet believe that a divorce is inevitable.
Your Royal Highness, can you still be king following your confession?
Whenever we left for an engagement, whether it be in this country or abroad, you know, she is the lead star, she is the lead actor, and it is a piece of theatre. If you give a good performance, everybody's happy and they want you to come back. If you give a bad performance, they don't want you back. It doesn't matter who you are. But Diana, despite all the unhappiness of her personal relationship with her husband, was your consummate performer. And I mean consummate. I mean, I don't know anybody within the royal family at that time that was better than her. To such an extent that, you know, her popularity ratings were just so high above any other one member of the royal family.
Well, Diana said at the time, you know, privately, she said that she really wanted, she'd got her new life, and she wanted people to know what she was doing, and she was really very involved in her charity work. Not a huge amount of it, but she was very focused on it, and she discovered that she actually had a power of healing, which was, she learnt to heal, and she could use it. So she had an aura about her, which was extraordinary, actually. And she was really keen to get across some of the work she was doing. And Bashir, as now we know, was a deeply unpleasant and dishonest person. He persuaded her that instead of really talking about her charity, she should talk about herself and her marriage. And he was a very persuasive person. And she got on very, very well with him. And after a couple of clandestine meetings, they made this recording.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
It became so iconic because it just looked so unique, really. Diana with her head to the side and this heavy eye makeup and showing so much emotion. And of course, that was the first time where she publicly spoke about this third person in her marriage, i.e. Camilla Parker Bowles. Spoke about how even when she walked down the aisle, she saw her and this very crowded marriage, as she put it. And that was really the first time, although people in the press had known about all of this bubbling under the surface, that the general public got to find out, essentially, that she'd been living this life with huge adultery in her face, essentially.
It was much more explosive than Charles's interview. And to this day, people haven't forgotten it, and we're constantly being reminded about it because there's been an inquiry into how Bashir actually got Diana to talk so intimately about herself. What he did, in a nutshell, was he frightened her. He told her that her house was being bugged, that people were listening into her conversations, that her private secretary, Patrick Jeffson, was dishonest, all of which was total lies. And he really scared her. So he got her to talk out because she wanted to put her point of view forward. So it was a dreadful thing to do. And I think to this day, you know, people are really angry about it.
I think she's told her side of the story, and she's actually said it herself rather than it being written down. You actually come from her own mouth. So, you know, it's got to be the truth, hasn't it?
I suppose she'll get quite a lot of support from it. She does come across as if she's been done wrong by the prince.
After Panorama, the Queen realised that this couldn't go on because it was taking up all the news, and there were important things happening. The monarchy has no power, they only have influence, and at this moment, it was their shenanigans that were making the news, which is completely wrong, and she was very concerned about the institution of the monarchy with all this scandal going on. She thought, there's only one thing to do, and the Queen is head of the church, and the last thing she wants is a divorce. And so she must have thought about it very carefully, and decided that that was the only way forward to stop all the tittle-tattle and the Waleses and Diana and the battle of the war of the Waleses. It had to stop. So she basically ordered them to divorce.
The Princess of Wales has agreed to Prince Charles's request for a divorce. A spokeswoman for the Princess said that Diana will continue to be involved in all decisions relating to the couple's children, and she will continue to live at Kensington Palace. Buckingham Palace had no immediate reaction to the statement. The Queen had written to both Charles and Diana last December advising them to go ahead with the divorce. The letter followed Diana's admission of adultery during a television interview.
The Princess, here at the centre of attention last Friday when the terms were settled, didn't attend the court. The entrance to the Princess's London home tonight. She's said to be inside Kensington Palace, very sad and very pensive, according to friends.
I think they were both very sad. Diana, in particular, never wanted to get divorced. In her heart, although she was with another man, Charles was the one that got away, and she always had a place in her heart for Charles. And it wasn't what she wanted, and she felt a failure. They both felt they'd failed. And they both felt they'd failed their children. So it was very, very sad for both of them. I think Diana wanted to get married again, and she wanted to have another child. Again, I think getting married again probably was a bit of a fantasy. Certainly getting married to the doctor that she was in love with, or thought she was in love with, was a fantasy, because it would never have worked out. It wouldn't have worked for him. Well, Hasnat Khan was a heart doctor. And Diana loved doctors, and she was fascinated by the human body and how it worked, and she loved healing and saving lives. So she was at the Brompton Hospital. She used to visit at very odd hours, sometimes in the middle of the night, and she'd been doing a little round of visits there. Just involuntary, not announced or anything. And she got into the lift with Hasnat Khan, and she just looked at him and thought, "You're wonderful." And then she pursued him, and eventually she got him. But he was very, very worried that the press would get hold of it, and he couldn't deal with that.
Of course, their relationship was nearly 2 years in the making. 2 years, no one knew about him. Again, I was the go-between. I would bring him into the palace. I'd ask chef to cook dinner for two. I'd wait dinner for two. I'd make sure they were comfortable before I went home. And in the morning, I'd take him back in the boot of my car to the hospital. So the police never saw him. The chefs never saw him. The maids never saw him. And no one saw him, just me. The princess wanted Hasnat to come out, to declare his love, to be in public with her. There isn't one picture of Hasnat and the princess because he was so careful not to let his world collide with hers. But how could that be? How could they coexist in the same room, in the same world? A surgeon and a princess. It just didn't seem right. And on top of all of that, he was Muslim. And back then, that would not have been accepted.
Ragazzi, per cortesia. Per cortesia.
There were so many people that let go of her, that abandoned her, that let her go into the world. It wasn't a safe place for her. She was too important. She was too big a person to be let free. And having lived inside that safety of that gilded cage of a palace for so long, what happens to a beautiful peacock when you let it into the wild? It gets eaten by something. You see, she needed to be kept safe, and that's what she was looking for. She was looking for her Aristotle Onassis. You see, she always thought that she was as kind of Jackie Kennedy, that had lost her mainstay in life and still needed someone to take care of her and protect her and keep her safe. And in a way, Dodi Al-Fayed was a kind of Aristotle Onassis. He was heir to a fortune, had an aeroplane and a boat, and was able to take the princess around the world in a safety corridor.
He was very nice to women. He wasn't a nasty person at all. He was a very sweet person, and he treated Diana like the princess she was. Nobody else had treated her like that.
And that's what thrilled her, in a way, that for once in her life she'd found someone that could treat her in the way which she'd become accustomed, and the way that her lifestyle had always been.
You know, with Hasnat Khan, she had to sort of hide him at the back of her car, and they had to, you know, they mostly ate in, or if they went out, she was in disguise. But with Dodi, she could show herself off. So it was the first really free relationship she'd had since her marriage had broken down. It's the first time she could actually be out with someone. And she was having a ball.
She'd lived that relationship with Dodi Al-Fayed in 40 days. It was 40 days from beginning to end. Now, you might think it was a year. Because it was played entirely on the world stage, you think it was longer. It was 40 days. From the moment she met him to the moment she died. And it was over.
Paris for a short time, and now there is confirmation that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died. She died at 4 a.m. after going into cardiac arrest. That, according to doctors at the hospital in Paris, Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead.
From 1,000 bouquets outside the palace gates, the scent of a late summer confirming the end of a life cut short. So it was with a reluctance, a struggle, and a sense of helplessness that yesterday's truth dawned irrefutable. Today's ordeal was acceptance. The rivers in London were the Thames and the Tears, and the queues of cars and people drifting from palace to palace, drawn by affection and an overwhelming loss, and a need to say thank you and goodbye.
It was really more the pressure of being on such public display that got to her, and I think that's the pressure that gets to every girl that marries into the royal family. But no one had ever experienced this before. Diana was the first one. And I remember the Queen sort of saying, it's just because she's young and new and it'll all calm down. Because it never calmed down, it just got worse. So she was under a lot of pressure.
Well, I think she'd be remembered for her ability, her sense of humor, her friendly character, there's no doubt about that, and her generosity. You know, she was an incredibly generous individual, not only with the material things of giving, but with the generosity of actually listening and her time.
In the beginning, she was a shy, naive, quiet girl who knew nothing about the world. And when she departed this world, she was a professional, knowledgeable, spiritual, complete woman. In between, she transformed. She had to. She had to survive.